Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today.
I've been to incidents where literally you've had a quarter of a litre of chemical spilt and it's killed 4 miles of major river.
No.
Mm-hmm.
What could I ask what that chemical was if you weren't giving anything away?
Cypermethrin and trifluorine. It was a herbicide mix, and it went into the land drain and straight into the water course, and it wiped out the river. Stop it at the source. That's the most important thing that anyone can do. If it does get off into a receptor, it's important that we are told immediately so we can make an assessment of what is going to be the potential damage.
It's about building relationships between the EA and the fire service at a first responder level before the incident, so that when you have to have those multi-agency, difficult, challenging conversations during an incident, you're doing it with a friendly face.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together. Hey folks, before we get into today's episode, just wanted to introduce you once again to our mobile application, Drillbook. Now, if you listen to the podcast, you're probably the sort of person that likes to develop themselves. Now, Drillbook is built to be the home of training ideas for drill grounds all across the world. It's a library of content built by firefighters for firefighters. It's for training ideas, it's for incident debriefs, radio messages. We've got if code templates in there, knots and lines, quick reference guides, interview questions, answers, and guidance. So go in there, check it out. You want to develop yourself. If you're looking to develop a firefighter on your station, head into the App Store or click the notes in the podcast links below. Before we get started, could you just give us a little background on who you are and where you're from and how on earth we are sat here having a conversation like this?
I'm Andrew Barnes.
Andrew,
I work for the Environment Agency. I'm in the Environment Incident Planning National Team, and my main role is the external organisation, external relations, so making sure that all organisations, Cat 1, Cat 2 responders, industry and our own staff are fully versed on how to actually protect the environment, to actually take mitigation and control measures. And I generally get many things come across my desk that get my head scratching, but it's very, very exciting. I've been in the agency now since my 28th year.
Wow.
17 years I was operational, with boots on the ground, so I've lived it, I've breathed it, I've done it, and I love my job, absolutely love it.
I was about to say, your job is make sure everyone knows what they're doing and they talk to each other. God, unpick that haystack. Because we assume from the public's perspective, and everybody is doing the best they can with the resources they've got, but so many people changing roles, so many people changing, and the environment changing, our resources changing, our equipment changing, the demands of the government and the public. It is an ever-evolving beast.
Yeah.
Give us yourself, handsome. Where are you from and who are you?
Good afternoon. Ed Sullivan. I'm the Head of Hazardous Materials at the National Chemical Emergency Centre, a role that I've had for 3.5 years now. We work with private and public sector organisations. We run the ChemSafe scheme on behalf of the Department for Transport, through which we look after all Cat 1 response organisations during their response to incidents involving hazardous materials. We also work with a lot of private sector organisations globally, especially more and more so at the moment with regards to their net zero strategies. So things like alternative fuels, hydrogen, lithium-ion batteries, methanol as a carrier of hydrogen because it's easier to, methanol as a blend with diesel and anhydrous ammonia as a transporter for hydrogen. Yeah.
I think this, I was so excited. We've actually been speaking. When I looked at
a couple of years now,
of years, this happens so much with the podcast, right? It's like a life cycle of guests because I meet an incredibly interesting person, and you two have met so many thousands of interesting people, and then you want to do a thing together, or you plan to do a thing together, and then life happens.
Yep.
And then it wasn't until I was down at one of the facilities in the UK and seeing a member of someone that was on one of your courses, and I said, oh, you're on that course, that sounds fascinating. A member of your team, Andrew, from the Environment Agency. And I said, who's your tutor? And they said, is it? And I went, God. And that head moment, I was like, I can't believe we haven't reconnected. Anyway, the Fire and Rescue Service, one of our myriad of responsibilities is our commitment to the environment and trying to mitigate the effects of our duties and the emergencies that we attend from that. But I always think it's one of the most vaguest aspects of our role, with the greatest respect, because it also has such a delayed effect sometimes from where we stand. It's like savable life. Okay, we all kind of understand that. We know what that looks like. And when somebody dies, with the greatest respect, it's very obvious the way we have or haven't done our job correctly. Savable property, again, very similar. It's obvious when it's gone wrong. Environment, it's one of those where we're trying to do the best we can with the knowledge and resources we have, but we're not really sure if we're getting it right. And then globally, we zoom out and go, looks like we're getting something wrong, but I don't know what we're getting wrong. So, I mean, Andrew, I'd love to ask you first and foremost, kind of where you see the relationship with first responders, the emergency services, and then crossing the chasm, if you will, which is lovely not to be a chasm, but I think sometimes there is a chasm, with the Environment Agency and what you see from your side of from the riverbank, if you will.
Yeah. For me, the Fire and Rescue Service partnership with the Environment Agency is one of the most important partnerships we have. It's one of the longest partnerships we've had for environmental protection. And we've always worked very closely with the Fire and Rescue Service for many years. We do make equipment available on the frontline appliances. We make the grab packs, but as we've just spoken a while back, is actually there's a bit of misunderstanding what those grab packs are for and how to actually implement the control and mitigation of pollution. We also make available the environment protection units. We part fund the environment protection units, which are a bigger grab pack on wheels. That's what I call it as. What they offer to us is, because we are not a blue light service, when an incident happens, we cannot get there as quickly as the fire service does. No. So what the EPU does, it provides us with that immediate first light, blue light response, and they can get there ASAP. What we have to do is ensure particularly those crews on the EPUs understand about how we train and we inform about actually why are you doing it, what are you doing it for, and what are the objectives and outcomes. Same goes with the frontline appliances on the grab pack. Very small amounts of kit, but that small amount of kit, one clay damage mat can make a huge difference. One thing I'm always keen to stress to the Fire and Rescue Service and other emergency services is how big an incident for the Environment Agency actually is. The fire service have their incident, they're focused on that incident at that zone, which might be a few hundred yards. For us, it could spread miles.
You help us quantify what is actually happening here. Because we go, oh, well, it's only going off to that stream over there. Or we don't really know where that's going. No. We quote these buzzword bingo. We say source, receptor pathway and all that sort of stuff. I mean, your relationship's obviously been going on for quite some time professionally and seeing both sides of it. What are some of the common misunderstandings, the common myths, the common not connecting the dots properly?
So the biggest, Andrew and I have just been speaking about this morning. We've just finished delivering a course together this week, and I think that we're trying to work together more closely when we deliver courses to the fire service, especially so that the fire service can actually see the benefits of working with the EA and communicating with the EA as early as possible. The EA are very, very supportive of fire service activity and fully understand, and I'm sure Andrew will back me on this, that life-saving activity comes first. Absolutely. Going back to the grab packs, the way that we talk about them is they are an environmental first aid opportunity, really.
Why have we got the things that we have got on them? For anybody that's unfamiliar, because I know we do have listeners, from all different emergency services, people at different lengths of their careers, but also we do have a lot of members of the public that simply want to understand the role of a first responder a bit more. So if you could dumb it down so even a knuckle-dragging firefighter like me can understand it. What's on there and why on earth is it there?
We have a mantra. We want everybody to chant this mantra, source, pathway, receptor.
Okay, what on earth does that mean?
Right, source. Source is what is something coming from.
Okay.
So you could have a barrel with a hole in it, it's spewing liquid, that's your source.
Okay.
Your pathway is where is that liquid going across, so it's going to be going across the ground and could enter a drain. That's a pathway. And the receptor is the receiving environment, whether it be ground,
Receiving environment,
whether it be ground, whether it be water, whether it be air.
That's a great point about ground, because people will think like, where's it
forget.
go? Oh, it's going nowhere.
Yeah.
It's always going somewhere. Okay.
Well,
And a common one.
What does that ground belong to? What is it used for? What's beneath it?
Well, I live in the southeast,
Okay.
and our water, we rely 75% of our water on groundwater.
Okay.
If you were to let something spill onto chalk, particularly, because it's very fragmented, it's an aquifer, it's great for holding water, but it's also great for allowing chemicals to go into the aquifer. So we want people to understand that even if it goes on the ground, you think, oh, it's going to do nothing. Actually, it's what underneath, what the bedrock is. If it's on an aquifer, you could actually take out a whole drinking water supply, and I've seen it happen. And we're not talking about just a few people, we're talking about communities as well.
Because that's the thing, isn't it? It will go somewhere, and then at some point in time, something will happen. It'll have an environmental impact, it'll have a societal impact, a public health impact, and the government will turn around to you, not you directly, but and go, tell me how it happened. Where's all this X come from? Where's all this chemical that's now in this thing come from? And you'll go, I've no idea. Let's go and test for source receptor pathway. I can't find the source.
And we see it. We often have
something crops up.
Yeah, we often have instances. Suddenly you might get, oil's coming out there. Where's that come from?
Where is
no
that
idea. We've had no incident.
Yeah.
It's because it's historic. Because eventually it will work its way out to the environment, whether it be into the groundwater, into the aquifer, into the groundwater that we drink or take for crops. Not all groundwater is used for drinking water. No. A lot of groundwater is actually used for irrigation of crops. Agriculture. And when you talking about that and you're knocking out agricultural crops, you're going to
talk about ground soil and how much that's been damaged and how vital that is. And now if we're throwing all these extra unknown chemicals on it,
absolutely,
kind of cutting our own legs out from beneath ourselves.
We're talking about ground in particular, but the whole aspect of the grab pack is to stop it. Stop it at the source. That's the most important thing that anyone can do. If it does get off into a receptor, it's important that we are told immediately so we can make an assessment of what is going to be the potential damage, how far it's going to go, and we can actually deploy our own resources to try and treat it and mitigate it. So it's vitally important that the fire and rescue service, if they know of something that's going down the drain, let us know as soon as you possibly can. And generally, they do. We've got a very good
I think there's a lot that doesn't make it through the filter. That's Pete Wakefield's opinion, no one else's.
Okay.
But I think there is because some of it's out of fear.
It is fear.
Or are you going to say I didn't do my job wrong? Is my boss going to say why didn't I've given you the stuff? I mean, Ed, you sit on both sides of this.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
You've seen what really happens. Without naming any names, you'll be like, I've seen, you've seen what happens.
Yeah, I've been there operationally for nearly 20 years in the fire service before taking this job on. And the key, we've been talking about it this morning with the Environment Agency. We're running a hazmat advisor course coming up very soon. We'll be having the same conversation with them. It's about relationships. Yeah. It's about building relationships between the EA and the fire service at a first responder level before the incident happens. So that what we encourage the EA to do is to take the biscuits to the fire station, get there about 11 o'clock for tea and toast. And
the value you'll get from those conversations.
And go and learn, go and have a look around that appliance. Go and train with them. Work out together what the local risks are that you may have to respond to, and put a plan together before the incident, so that when you have to have those multi-agency, difficult, challenging conversations during an incident, you're doing it with a friendly face. And we tell the fire service exactly the same thing.
Otherwise, it's like a family. It's like, I thought you were doing it. I thought you were doing it, and then no one did it by accident.
The value of that relationship is phenomenal.
You've made a good point. I do see us as being a Cat 1 responding family.
100%.
Because we're all working towards the same goal. But the thing is do people understand what they're working towards? And I think that's where we come in, is actually say to you, okay, we give you this grab pack. This is why we do it. And one thing I do on the hazmat course is I bring up a map and I start to zoom out and zoom out and zoom out until I show the Environment Agency instant scene, and it is miles wide.
Yeah.
We have to consider every sensitive receptor along that, say, watercourse, or where that plume might be going, or where that groundwater might be affecting. We have to consider
Every
everybody.
business, school,
Exactly.
agriculture, protected wildland.
Yeah,
everything.
one thing
Yeah.
is, I always bring up and I always say, well, there's a bat colony there.
Yeah. People go, what?
Why is the bat colony important?
Yeah.
Well, what do bats generally eat if they live near a watercourse? Insects from the watercourse. You knock that watercourse out, you knock out that food supply. It's really quite complex.
The links in the chain,
You know,
isn't it?
yeah, you could break down the food chain quite easily if you don't take the right action. I want to address something as well. You mentioned something. It's something which I do hear a lot about fire service personnel being a bit worried that we're going to come down them like a ton of bricks.
You're worried you're going to lose a job.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, we can't use CAFs, we can't use foam, I can't tell anybody I did this. And it's the worst thing. We know it in jobs. We're like, just tell me about something whilst I can do something about it. Keep it a secret. I can't help you. But sometimes you don't need to keep it a secret.
No.
And someone's paying the cost either way.
Absolutely. You know, I've heard that fire service personnel, when they hear the environment agent turn up, get very, very worried about are we going to come in? Are we going to start prosecuting? Are we going to start enforcement action? Unless someone does something really stupid, like literally
and malicious.
Like literally grab a barrel of chemicals and pour it down the drain. We know that firefighting activities will often result in environmental harm.
Messy, chaotic. We're trying to create structure out of chaos half the time.
But what we're doing through this partnership is saying, we recognise that you, in your activities, probably will cause environmental harm. Tell us quickly and we can start to work with you to minimise that impact. And it might be by putting something down like a damn-it mat across a drain and you stop it. Or if it does get into the watercourse, and we can get our technical experts, our duty officers to start looking, okay, fine, it's gone in there. Understandably, the firefighting activity's got to continue. Right, what can we do as the Environment Agency now to mitigate and control it and minimise the impact? And we've got a lot of technical experts within the organisation, and we have duty roles. We have 24/7 duty roles. We can bring a lot to the party, and we want to always take that worry away from the fire and rescue service.
So, having worked alongside Andrew for a number of years now, one of the things that I've learned that I didn't know when I was operational in the fire service is some of the things that they bring to the party that make our lives a bit easier.
What's available?
So, Andrew, tell us a bit about Easy Maps and how that adds value to an incident commander, a first responder, dealing with a hazmat incident.
We have a mapping system, the Easy Map system, and it basically gives us all of those environmental issues, the river water courses, the groundwater, the aquifers, and we can bring it up. We can also bring up where the sensitive receptors are. So on the map, we can actually, when we're assessing an impact of an incident, say if we've got, say milk, which I just want to say is one of the most polluting substances you can get that goes into
It's always the one I
watercourse.
use when I talk about milk on the M1 and
now,
what's the
say
cost.
if that's barrelling down a watercourse, what our map can produce is basically where those sensitive receptors are, where it's going to go, how we can mitigate it. Can we in fact dam that watercourse off and over pump it? And that's where we'll call on the fire service to help us do this as well. Can we aerate? And again, we generally use mechanical aeration. We can use chemical aeration for our contractors, but you know what? Fire and rescue service are very good at aerating by just squirting water. So actually we can identify and say to the fire service, you know what, could you help us?
I would be remiss if I didn't ask, because I have a very, very, very wide, rough understanding of it. Why is milk so damaging to an environmental watercourse?
Good question.
Very good question. It's a foodstuff.
Okay.
Anything that is food is food, and it's not just food for me and you. It's food for all the organisms that live in the watercourse as well, all the bacteria. And once you introduce a food source into that environment, the bacteria go absolutely nuts and they start eating like nothing else. So as they're eating, they're duplicating, replicating, and as they're doing that, they're just taking up and stripping the oxygen from the water. So you end up with basically no oxygen in the water. So all the aquatic species that you lose the oxygen die. And because water is so soluble, it can go a long, long way very, very quickly, depending on the flow of the watercourse.
Just to go one further step down that rabbit hole, and I won't go too far, I promise. There must be some really stringent stuff around dairy farms, and I bet that's a thing for them. Like, they have to be careful what they do with the runoff and where they put it, and blah 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 blah. It's got to be hard for dairy farmers out there.
Yeah,
there's not good for it. It's hard. I wouldn't be in the business.
It is hard, and I'll say that farmers don't want to pollute.
No, of course not.
They don't want to pollute, and we understand.
And they had all
that.
the animal. There's been so many diseases that have impacted them, and
But what we now have dedicated agricultural officers.
Yeah.
And they will go out and do agricultural visits, and they will go to farms, and they will offer pollution reduction advice as well. But if a farmer has an worry, just ring up their local environment agency office and just talk things through. We're here to help. We're not here to hit people with a big stick all the time. Actually,
Thanks for letting us know. Here's your fine. Jeez, all right, fair, right. What have I learned from that? Don't talk to the EA. That's what I've learned. But no, you're right. So
we basically we'd rather be proactive and work with people than take enforcement action. We're here to help farmers, communities, fire service to prevent. We don't want any environmental damage to happen, nor do they. So we work together to reduce it.
It comes back to
that Easy Maps. Sorry, is that Easy Maps available to people? Is that public? Can Fire and Rescue Service? Because I don't know why that's not on MDTs.
No, we don't have access to it.
When I was
in the fire service, we didn't have access to it. But that's the value of building these relationships with the EA from a fire service perspective and vice versa, because then they can learn about what equipment is on a fire appliance and an environmental protection unit, and then the fire service can learn about things like Easy Maps and how they get access to it during an incident.
The only thing I remember is, do you remember the overlay maps?
I do, yes.
That's it. That's all we had. We haven't even got them anymore because they're thought redundant. It was like, put this laminate over the map and it tells you what the wind does. And I was like, oh. Yes. And that's probably we had weather data.
The 12 segments.
Yeah. Oh, it didn't work. We didn't know how to bloody use it anyway.
You mentioned something earlier, which is very. I really want to advocate this. I lead on the memorandum of understanding with the National Fire Chief Council. It's currently being refreshed and it is going to be published hopefully soon.
Okay.
I lead on the Annex 1 for environmental protection. Now that is the overarching national MOU. What we want is local fire and rescue services and local EM staff, environment agency staff, to work together and plan for their local area. What's in that local area?
What would we do?
Exactly. And you create a mini bespoke area memorandum of understanding.
Okay.
And that can go through the LRF as well, Local Resilience Forum. And it means that everyone understands at that local level.
Local resilience forums have really come into their strength over these past couple of summers. Have really seen the value that they've had, both with some big incidents, but also with the heat waves and stuff like that, and the floodings and things that we've had. A lot of people don't know could one of you talk us through a little bit what local resilience forums actually are for people that aren't familiar? Who the partners involved? It's okay if we haven't got a tremendous understanding. I'm putting my hand up because I haven't, even though I worked as operational assurance for a little bit. I spoke with the partners, but who are they? What would that group be made up of?
So people think that a common misconception is that it is a organisation. It's not. It's a joining up of multiple organisations, a part of which is the Fire and Rescue Service, police, the Cat 1 response organisations, but then also the local authority, for example, emergency planning within that.
So the councils or the shires,
exactly,
housing organisations.
Yes. So and their role could be when there's a big incident in a certain place and people need rehousing,
Grenfell, rehoming people,
perfect, exactly.
and they pop up and say, right, we've got these 5 sites dedicated as this, and they bring all the rations out and they bring the clothing out and they rehome these people.
Yeah, that's right.
So I would be remiss because I feel like I cut one of you off. I've got a terrible habit of interrupting, but we spoke about source. So what is available? We've got the grab packs, the first aid packs. If it's a big thing and we're not sure what to do with it, what have EA got available to us? How can we deal with those things? Or even for people that aren't familiar, the simplistic ways of how we apply the things that we have got on the trucks in that initial stop it at the source.
So on the frontline appliances in the grab packs, the environmental first aid, we've got the dammit for small holes or valves.
What's dammit for people that don't know?
So
What
it's clay.
It's clay.
Okay. Yeah, with bits of hessian in it. Is that so to give it a bit of structure so that it holds together.
Okay.
The pots are designed so that they can fit straight over the top of a valve on a vehicle. extremely effective actually, or you can take it out and put it over a hole to stop something leaking. We've then got the mats that are designed to block drains, made from the same material, again with Hessian in, very, very effective. Bigger areas, you can put multiple of them together for the same purpose. We've got
and people that are familiar, sorry, that's obviously for putting over the top of a drain so the thing can pull, because the surface is naturally designed for it all to go in that direction. But if it's a thing you don't want going in the thing, you just want it to pull there for us to then come and pump. Which is another question in a minute, like who comes in and gets the stuff?
Yeah, okay, great. So stopping it from getting into a pathway, basically. So you're making a pool of it, like you absolutely said there, and then we have another organisation come and pump that away.
It's normally the polluter.
I was about to say, because this is the sticky bit, and Ed will know far, far, far better than me. It's like, when do the emergency services stop dealing with the thing? Because we do lots of things to be nice, like we go to schools and pump out their basements when actually there's no life, or we do the right thing. There's a certain amount of things we can be utilised for because it's the right thing to do. But where I work, there's universities around us and stuff like that. If they have an accident, or they do something wrong, and they go and they turn to you sometimes and go, and it might not be our malice, there might just be a new person, they're not sure, and they go, so how are you going to deal with it? And I'm like, well, the fact that you've got this thing on site, part of your risk, we should not form part of your risk assessment for your thing.
That's right.
And who then turns to them? Is it the EA and says, Here, we'll pump it out for you, but here's the bill, or you need to hire a private firm to come and get the thing?
That's exactly what we say. We work on polluter pays principle.
Okay.
If you cause the pollution, you have to pick up the cost. You have to do the organisation of the clean-up, but it has to be done with accredited contractors. How
long do they get to do it?
It has to be done immediately.
What about, like, I know that this is a really difficult one, might be a terrible example actually, like the BP squirting oil into the ocean for God knows how long that was happening for. And I know that's more of a national thing and perhaps a bad example, but if it happens, my driver got drunk and he drove into the local reservoir, and the reservoir is now full of my stuff.
Yeah.
What have I got to do?
Well, you could bottle up the reservoir to stop it getting any further.
Okay.
But if there's a danger...
You could? Me, I own the company? Or EA are going to do it?
Well,
because if you wait, which you wouldn't, but...
We have emergency operatives that can come out and put in what we call emergency first aid.
Okay.
Which is basically just something for the very short term to bottle it up. Then we will say, when I say bottle it up, so it doesn't go off anywhere further.
Yeah.
Now you can take it, if it's in a reservoir or it's in a stretch of watercourse and it's bottled up, actually it's not going to go anywhere. So that will allow more time for the recovery to happen. But we want it to happen as quickly as possible.
Because it still does have an impact.
Oh, absolutely.
If I go walking there with my dog every day, and my dog decides to go in there because my dog goes in there every day.
Exactly.
And now he's jumping into whatever.
Yeah. So we really need it out as soon as possible, because some of these materials and chemicals will break down into different chemicals, different components. So it needs to be removed as soon as possible. You just can't leave it there. So
I imagine with so many innovations and new businesses and entrepreneurs across the UK, that must be an absolute horrible beast to manage, because it's quick to start something, it's quick to get a business going and try and do a thing and not have provisions. Like, that's probably on the last thing on the list for people to think about.
Well, really, a company who has got should have what's the word I'm looking for?
Due diligence?
That's the one. Oh, that'll do. If you've got an activity that's going to cause potential environmental damage, you have an environmental risk assessment. What is my
responsibility,
risk? What is my risk? How can I reduce that risk? If anything bad happens, what do I do? So that's what we encourage, particularly on our permitted sites. It's actually a requirement, because obviously we permit sites, waste sites, for instance. It's a requirement they have an emergency risk assessment. So
I'd love to ask you about coma sites actually at some point as well, because
dear.
I don't know very much about them.
Okay.
They're big and scary, and I've seen a few incident debriefs about a few of them, but I don't know where they fall on the hierarchy of...
We have a dedicated coma team, and maybe this is for another podcast.
Yes, I think you're definitely, before I take us off on too many different rabbit holes.
Just going back to your original question, Pete, what do organisations do? When we're not training the emergency services, a lot of our time is spent working with organisations such as universities, such as any organisation really that has got a risk
Schools.
Educational establishments, process, industry,
factories,
chemicals. We work with them to prevent incidents from happening, first of all, because that's always where we want to be, but then to enable them to deal with incidents themselves without having to call the emergency services, based on whatever their risks are.
Other on-site emergency teams. Like,
Yeah,
what do you really
exactly
need?
that.
What tools
Exactly
do you need
that.
to contain it? Because
Yeah.
you need to deal with this. Don't just ring 999.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And a lot of the time, they don't need to phone 999 because they've got people working within that organisation who are more than capable of dealing with these small incidents. If they were to have something that's bigger and they would need emergency service support, then we train them to work alongside the emergency services to bring that incident to a timely, successful conclusion.
I want to take us back for a second to the incident commander, to the person who turns up to the thing.
Okay, yeah.
Ed, how soon should we be informing the EA? So let's go to the things like car crashes on our motorway,
Okay, yeah.
or let's go. When should we raise the flag? Because usually by the time we say something, a certain amount of something's already gone somewhere. Because it's like a mobilisation message. It's easy to shout it, and it's easy to send it back. But if you call it too late, you might have missed your window. So what should we be telling people, and how soon should we be notifying through our control staff the environment agencies required this incident? And
So
what's that person going to add?
A good example of an incident type like that is something as simple as a car fire.
Okay.
So as an incident commander, an operational incident commander dealing with a car fire, I would just bolt it on to first impressions or informative. As soon as we know we're putting water on that and there is a way of it getting into the environment, we would always do what we could with the environmental first aid, the grab packs, but then I'd just ask my driver to bolt it on to a first impressions or a first informative that goes through. Or just inform to start with. For something that I know through working with Andrew is quite minor really in the grand scheme.
Because would the likelihood be it would be a phone call to a regional member of the team to the incident commander and then just have a chat about what that person can see?
First it will go through to our national incident reporting system, and then it goes through what we call triage.
Yep.
So at that stage they will triage the incident to assess the severity. We work on categorisation of incidents, Cat 1 being the most serious, and Cat 4.
What do you need to know from us to effectively triage it, sorry?
What it is, where it's going,
How much of it?
How long is it going to be happening? Has anything already gone off site?
When you say how much, and again, I know I'm getting simple, but I want to break it, because people say about a bucket contains this, a barrel, most people, if I said how much is in that, we'd get a lot of different answers.
So I used to talk about tanks of water, because we know how much we've got. It varies, doesn't it, across the country nowadays. We've got everything between 1,800 litres and 3,000 litres on some more rural appliances nowadays. So, Andrew, we've discussed this in the past, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said we inform anyway. For information, please inform the EA. But with regards to a response, it would be something upwards of 3 tanks for a response, boots on the ground for the EA. Is that correct?
That's a lot.
It really depends on what
Depends on the
it is,
chemical,
right?
surely, yeah.
If you're talking about some of the most toxic chemicals,
you only need a drop of cyanide, don't you?
You only need a small amount.
Yeah.
So actually, we will assess that. We have experts who are more chemically knowledgeable than me, although I'm hazmat officer, as it were, hazmat lead. I'm getting my skill set up. But they'll know some pesticides and herbicides are incredibly polluting in parts per billion.
Really?
So all you need, and I've been to incidents where you've
I always
lost,
thought 1,000 to 1 you'll dilute most things, but something like that sounds not be the case.
No. I've been to incidents where literally you've had a quarter of a litre of chemical spilt and it's killed 4 miles of major river.
No. What could I ask what that chemical was if it won't give anything away?
Cypermethrin and trifluorine. It was a herbicide mix. And what it was, the contractor had purged their boom arms just to clean them out.
Sorry, so for people, the boom arms sticking out from the side of the tractors that spray the fields?
Yes.
Right.
Unfortunately,
and they just purged them onto...
Yeah. Well, they thought it was just normal land. Unfortunately, they didn't know that, and I'm sure many farmers will appreciate this, they didn't know underneath there was a old land drain. And it went into the land drain and straight into the water course, and it wiped out the river.
What a nightmare.
It was a nightmare.
Yeah.
Did they get a slap on the wrist?
Yes.
Bless them. But yeah, no. Do you guys and girls have flashcards, symbols type them? I know this thing must have already been done, because I always used to say people, I worked in factory before, everyone on IBC is, no, okay, so a metre squared thing, that's an easy, we'll start there, 1,000 litres, yeah? Barrel. Well, barrels actually come in lots of different sizes. You might call that a barrel, whereas I think barrel, I think of the things that are on cargo containers going over the ocean, and there's the
205 litre drums.
205 litre drums versus a foam
a 25
barrel.
litre drum barrel, yeah.
I think that should be something that's in all of the black books for the incident commanders, because the Environment Agency may go, how much? And I'll go, it's 2 of them. All right, there's 400 litres. Yeah, or I think there's this much. Yeah, because it's hard to describe. But if you show me a thing, I can go, it looks like one of them. It's that much.
But the fire service, your role doesn't really roll about actually then assessing the toxicity of the environment. That's us. Mm-hmm. So you can tell us what's gone in there, and then we'll take on that role of actually finding out what it is, how environmentally damaged it is, and then we will then start our own response to that. Okay. As long as we know what it is and roughly how much has gone into the receiving environment, that'll give us an idea of what we're potentially going to look at in terms of the damage and how far we might need to actually start putting in mitigation and control.
So where you are, how much and what it is.
Yeah, we're the experts in terms of. I know you do your identification, your DIM capacity, and you know a little bit about. But that's where we come in.
The irony with that is, I believe the Environment Agency and National Resilience pay for those assets.
No, we don't pay for.
Do they not?
No.
How does the DIM
DIM
model
is a
work?
National Resilience.
It is a National
asset.
Resilience.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, because it's given to the fire service, and we crew it and we use it.
Yeah.
But it's not our thing. And there's a
It's
massive
Home Office.
spectrum.
It's National Resilience.
It's a Home Office sort of like national.
It's a massive spectrum of people's familiarity or lack thereof with the very expensive and useful equipment that is on there. But it's one of those things, because it's not really ours. Sometimes how much it is or isn't used, and when it could have been very beneficial, I find. I mean, you're far better than me, Ed, about how much a valuable asset that is and how little it gets used sometimes.
It is an incredibly valuable asset, and there are some really good quality, competent DIM crews out there. We work quite closely with them. But originally, when it was brought out, it was for CBRN incident types, wasn't it?
People that are unfamiliar, CBRN.
Sorry, yes, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear.
Yeah.
And put the explosives on the end of it as well. So CBRN, terrorist hazmats, deliberate hazmats, basically.
So a lot of this came out after some of the attacks.
That's right, yeah. And so it was brought out in anticipation of more incidents, events like that. Some services will use it for non-terrorist events, so to go and identify what a product is.
Yes. Illicit drugs factories, things like that.
Exactly, yes. Or white powder, go and identify what that white powder is a classic example of that.
A lot of those national resilience type assets and the big decontamination units and the mass decontamination for terrorist attacks, some of them are coming to the end of their life cycle.
Yep.
From your knowledge and experience and breadth, what do we know about what's happening as a result of that? Because I don't know where the terror threat is at the minute, but there seems to still be a lot of stuff going on. What do we know about what's happening beyond that? How is this continuing? It's okay if we're not sure. I can edit this bit out. But
the best thing I can say on that now is I know there's a review underway.
Okay.
And
it's an expensive call either way, isn't it?
Yeah. So we know that it's weren't there.
The mass decon
so
units used to be regional assets.
Yes, and that's right. And they were strategically located around the UK. And when they went, some fire services kept certain bits of equipment.
So in a lot of services, we don't just have the smaller bandage first aid type kits. They have we call them HMEPs, or everyone's got their own terminology. So the hazardous materials environmental protection units, and they seem to have extra stuff, bigger stuff, and also again a lot of things that people don't carry on frontline appliances. So do you know how many of them are in the UK and what's really on them? Because I don't think every service has them. Or do they? I don't know.
No, not every service has them.
And they're partially funded by...
They're partially funded by the Environment Agency. So we make money available, I think it's to the tune of 25 grand for each unit.
Per service, right.
And
does the service have to pick up the other side of that?
It depends on what the other service want to put on. If they want to put their own kit on it, that's fine. But we make it particularly just for the environment protection equipment. But when the environment protection equipment has been used, then you come to the Environment Agency and we'll just restock it and we pay for that.
Oh, okay. Because there is a real reluctance, and I said this to her before we came on, about we don't use a lot of this stuff to train with. We just tend to talk about it and do presentations because we don't want to indent for the fact that we've used a thing and then we have to give them an incident number that we used it at, and we're like, we just got it out because we'd never used it. I've been in 15 years and never used one of these things.
So the key, again, coming back to a point we discussed earlier, is that relationship building and exercise together.
Yeah.
Train together. From a fire service perspective, invite the EA down. You'll find out where your local office is.
How can people do that, sorry?
So every fire service has got a link in, an officer who links in directly to the EA.
We are invigorating our single points of contacts for fire and rescue service. In fact, in
So a lot of people have retired, moved on.
Change roles.
That's the problem we find, is the fact that we can have our staff in place for many years, but the link to the fire service changes because it's generally seen as putting out to pasture. That's a nice role for you to do. So
I did it similar. Yeah. It's usually the person in operational assurance or an department similar to that.
Yeah. But there are ways that we can deal with that. And one of the things I will be doing is actually writing out a quick guide for a new a fire and rescue service spot about actually what your job entails, what we will do, what the partnership brings, how to work together. So someone who comes into that, okay, that's quite simple. And then just set up a meeting with your local EA, single point of contact, fire and rescue service, and start working together. We recognise that training and exercising is so important. How do you know how to put something out if you don't do it?
Yeah.
But what I'm doing, I'm going to raise my own profile here again. Right? Myself and Kent Fire and Rescue Service are currently just completing a new grab pack video DVD, which shows actually what the equipment is, how to deploy it, and also why do you deploy it.
Will that be available on YouTube or anywhere like that, or is it just
I'm going to get it put on the central
somewhere electronic
NFCC learning site?
I always say to people, don't lock these things away. Make them publicly available. Doesn't matter if members of the public see it.
Of course not, because it might actually. We've spoken about industry. They might actually. We could do some of those.
Yeah, learn from it. Go for it. Rather than paying $5,000 to hire a private specialist and consultant, look at how the experts at the EA are doing it with the first responders, and maybe learn a lesson or two.
It's all about education at the end of the day.
It should be, but some people are a bugger for hoarding knowledge. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask before we close, gents. So I want to be very respectful of your time. Is there anything? Because I'd love to have a follow-up episode about some of these. You mentioned privately a few fascinating individuals that I think would be, and also just some of the colossal environmental impacts of different incidents. So hopefully there'll be some follow-up for us. But is there anything in relation to the things we've discussed today that you think we have missed or brushed over a bit too much?
I just want to say that the Environment Agency isn't just environmental protection.
Of course.
It would be wrong of me not to mention our flooding colleagues as well, who are also working with the Fire and Rescue Service. We have other departments: water resources, biodiversity, fisheries, groundwater, and I'll probably get angry people say, "Why didn't you mention us?" But we are a massive organisation. But I tell you something: this is from what I know. The people in the Environment Agency, we are all fully committed to protecting the environment, and we are fully committed to these partnerships because we see the value in them. Absolutely.
Love it. Thank you so much for your time, gents. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Pete.
Firefighters Podcast is put together to develop, inspire, and hopefully even motivate those individuals who have chosen to serve our communities and be part of the first responder family. It's brought to you by myself, operational firefighter Pete Wakefield. If you have enjoyed today's episode and you want to see the podcast continuing, please head over to our Patreon page where you can support the ongoing efforts of the podcast. Please hit that follow, subscribe, or rate button on whatever platform you're listening to. Please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.